The SEC is moving forward with severe penalties for schools that attempt to sign professional players trying to return to college athletics. Violations could cost the program 50% of that sport's annual budget, suspend head coaches for 50% of the season, and revoke SEC voting privileges. The rule targets athletes who signed pro contracts, played on pro rosters, or entered drafts like the NFL, the NBA, or WNBA without properly withdrawing. The debate is in the spotlight as former Ole Miss players Daquan Wright and Xavion Harris look to join their former coach Lane Kiffin at LSU after being released from the NFL.